Oh, that was Rose.
Oh, hi, Rose. Thank you. Go ahead. You can please proceed with your testimony, and Brianne will keep the 5-minute timer.
Okay. Well, this is regarding, I guess, maybe the legislative stuff. I think there was something, and I just wanted to say, on behalf of, I'm president of the Hawaii Nurses Association, union, for nurses here in Hawaii. And I've had the privilege of talking, with various groups of people. And I just want to say, we are happy to be collaborative, whatever we need to do. Um, Retention, is something that we really want to get and work on. I've been amazed by the amount of recruitment, items and projects that have been done, and just the data is just amazing. And I believe I've talked to a few members before, and if we could gather more data, we're more than happy to help on that, especially for my members, and I'm sure we could get other members, especially at the bedside, with the RNs, with the burnout. I was reading some of the studies, so just want to put it out there. I'm a little bit of a bull in the china shop because I'm not familiar how this works, so I just always happy for feedback. I'm very open to that. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Rose. That was great. Thank you for your testimony. Does the board have any clarifying questions for Rose? Anyone, anything? Okay. Um, is there anyone else who would like to testify at this time? Okay. Hearing none, we will now proceed with the next item on the agenda. Okay, let's see. We are moving to item 3, a special talk story on the Kauai nursing environment. Is there any public testimony on this item? Okay, hearing none, we will move forward. And I am pleased to welcome our own board member, Tammy Napoleon from Kauai Community College. Tammy, we will go ahead and turn it over to you for the academic perspective.
Okay, please feel free to, this is kind of given to me last minute, so please feel free to ask me any questions regarding what else you would like to know. The academic side, so as you know, Kauai Community College is the only nursing or the only college on our island. We do have a nursing school that is a associate's degree nursing program with an LPN step out option. Currently, our challenges and issues are not necessarily different from what others are going through. And actually just went to a nursing summit, leadership summit conference in San Diego in March, and the environment is relatively similar. I think the challenges of being on a rural island makes it a little bit more impactful. But just to give you an idea of where we are, we currently have to limit our cohort because we don't have faculty. We generally, I think at this time, we did hire one, but going into the spring semester, we had only 4 full-time faculty plus me, with the program coordination and division chair duties. So the 4 full-time faculty are the faculty that teach full-time. Um, We do have 2 more open positions, and we are in the current phase of recruitment and interviewing the candidates. And hopefully, we have a successful search for those. And that's not necessarily, it's still filling vacancies, but not putting us at a full team. Um, so until that happens for August, anyway, we have to make decisions on our next cohort based on the resources we currently have. So that's the academic side. We're having a hard time retaining faculty that have come. Salary is one of the issues. Workload is another issue. And we lost a few seasoned faculty to retirements. And we have another seasoned faculty planning a retirement at the end of December. So the and two are planning to retire either by next academic year. So even though we are recruiting two positions, we're also losing two positions. So that is the challenge. And our state recruitment processes is kind of arduous and cumbersome to meet the demand of recruiting in a timely manner. But we are still going. We have, we have had, I think this is our 6th year of 100% pass rate. Our students are obtaining either going on for their bachelor's or beyond, or obtaining employment in Kauai. So we will stay our course, I assume. But I don't know what else you were asking. So ask me questions if you want to know specifically more, but that is more about the challenges that we face in the academic side of filling the needs of nurses in Kauai at this time.
Tammy,
Okay.
this is Clem.
Hey,
So
Clem.
how many are you admitting right now annually? Is it still 20?
No, this year we only admitted 16 because
Only
we didn't have
16.
once Maureen retired at the end of July, and then
Mm,
I had to take a FMLA. We literally only had 4 full-time faculty.
mm,
So
mm,
that we have 2 levels. We have first and second level. So
mm-hmm,
basically with second level getting 16 and to meet the Board of Nursing ratios, we admitted 16.
mm-hmm.
So going into fall, if our research, and we can't with the idea of potential that we will hire to, it is what we have to make a decision on the research we currently have. So currently we have 5 now. We recruited 1 faculty mid-semester, and but we have to make sure that cohort can be sustained by the existing resources for the 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So potentially only 16 again for fall.
Mm-hmm.
Tammy,
I
this
think
is
Gary has a
Linda.
question.
I think 2 people were talking at a time. I couldn't quite hear.
My hand is up, but Linda, go ahead. Okay. Hi, Tammy. From my experience in teaching at HPU, we had for many years, we had a lot of problems with tracking our new grads and finding out where they were and if they got hired after they were licensed and that kind of thing. I was wondering if you were still having that issue as far as revealing information about new grads from Kauai CC.
Actually, we don't have that issue per se because we do have smaller cohorts and our partnering institutions of where they're graduating. We do send a graduate survey to the graduates after they and let them know that's part of our accreditation process. And we generally have almost more than 50 or 75% response rate because again, it's a small cohort. We have done blurbs with text messaging with the survey. We've done emails. When we see them at the workplace, we let them know something is coming. So actually, we do have a lot of valuable and credible data that suggests to know where our students, the ones that we may fall short on getting data is if they move out of state.
Mm-hmm.
But we've also track social media and then reach out that way as well to give them the survey and then they take the survey. So that is our internal processes to meet our accreditation needs. But generally, again, with the small cohort and we have 16. we know all of 16 by heart and by name. So we can, yeah, and we do not threaten, that's not the word I want to use. We do ask them to participate in our accreditation process and fill out our survey for job placements and
Oh, good.
transfers.
Thank you. The advantage of being from a small community.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. Carrie, do you want to go ahead? I see we have several people with their hands up here.
Yeah, my question was, for your faculty recruitment, Tammy, you were talking about having trouble with retention. Are most of your candidates for faculty from Kauai, or are they coming specifically to work as faculty at KCC?
This last recruitment is someone from Kauai and also alumni of our program. So I think we're starting to get that. The prior ones to these have not been from Kauai. So they have either were planning to move to the islands or they were already here. I'm sorry, the other person that was prior but left actually, now I gotta go back. The last three hires, wait, 1, 2, 3. Yes, the last three hires, including the most recent one, are residents of Kauai.
Cool.
But the other two, actually the last four, so yes, they're all residents of Kauai, but we've lost 2 of them within a year.
Not cool.
Not cool.
So so them coming from Kauai is not necessarily protective against losing them early on. Okay, that was the question. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Carrie. Laura, I have you next.
Well, thank you so much. So I have a two-part question. One, and it continues from Carrie's question. So thank you. And thank you for giving this presentation today. My first question is, because we have seen in Carrie's workforce projections, the 2022 to 2037, that when we look at the population distribution, Kauai has like an equitable population, but when we look at nursing demand, there's inadequacy there. And so we need far more nurses on Kauai than we are currently producing today. So my first question is, ideally, from your perspective, living and preparing nurses on Kauai, what would be the ideal cohort size? Like, what would you like to grow to? And then my second question, which is more related to Carrie's line of questioning, is when you're looking at the applicant pools or perhaps talking to nurses in the community, are you seeing that there is that educational attainment, or do they have the education qualifications that are required for nursing faculty, or are there, and I ask that wondering if there's strategies or tactics that need to be deployed in Kauai to facilitate a more robust nursing workforce pool for this nursing instructor and nursing faculty role. So those, my two questions are, what's your ideal cohort size, and are there any strategies or tactics that could support broadening the pool of nurse faculty?
Okay, so just a little historical when I answer the first question. Back in 2012, when there was this big legislative push to increase again the demand of nursing across the state, we did acquire a lot of legislative funding to increase our faculty as well as our facilities. So that's where we obtained our two portables that was designed for nursing and got our simulation and equipment. At that time, we were considered fully staffed, and our facilities were made to accommodate 32 students. So that, I think, would be, again, the facility that we currently have has been built around us accepting a cohort of 32 students a year. Ideally, I think at this time, and then again, from 2012 until now, we've had this revolving door of losing and gaining and losing and gaining and trying to keep up with the Board of Nursing ratios or meet them. Generally, our average cohort size has been 24, which means that's 3. So with 32, that was 4 full-time faculty assigned to a cohort or a level at one time. So that's 8 full-time faculty, not including your program coordinator or leadership. And we've had up until maybe the last year or so, we had about 24 as our numbers went down to 6 faculty. So that's 3 in each level. And then when we went down to 4 full-time faculty, we cut that down to 16. So I think ideally right now, the ideal size is based on what faculty we have to meet our Board of Nursing. But if we can strategically try and get to 32, but we have also started to explore, or I've started to explore looking at similar things that Maui has done as I talk to our advisory groups about CNA to LPN tracks. Even though we have an LPN step out that might not necessarily be meeting the community demands, especially when it's an RN program and students are entering the program with the goal of being an RN. The other thing that is impacting our healthcare in general is we lost our medical assisting, our medical assisting program coordinator, who was the sole person driving the program. And with Meta gone, all of the health-minded students are now like, okay, I guess we got to choose nursing. So we have this influx of pre-nursing students now all trying to get into nursing because that's in their mind, that's the only track they can see. And it's going to be heartbreaking when I have only 16 slots. So that is where I think I am struggling, or I see the bigger picture where if we cannot meet the demand, then we're going to lose the students that are going to go to other programs and not remain on Kauai for a nursing program either. Looking at those things, trying to find other avenues where, again, we can't even find a CNA instructor. So that's the hard part. But we cannot grow either program. I can't have more RN students, or I can't consider a CNN to LPN without faculty to do so. Like, we don't have the resources to build those programs at the moment. But that is some strategic goals we are looking at. Now I totally forgot your second question.
You talked about the retention challenges, salary workload.
Okay.
But in terms of increasing the applicant pool of potential nurse faculty, do they have the education they need? Do they have, what are the challenges in getting a robust clinical or nursing faculty applicant pool?
So within the last, I would say the last 2-3 years, all candidates have met the minimum requirements of a master's or doctorate degree, except for one that we hired as a bachelor's degree with exceptions and, dangled the carrot of you can get your master's. But I think that was one of the reasons that it became untenable for her, is trying to enter a master's degree program. All of these faculty within the last 5 years do not have academic experience. They're all coming from clinics or not necessarily hospitals, but not academia. So the learning curve, I think, stepping into an academic setting when you don't have a lot of academic background. I've been there. I didn't come with academic background when I started. It can be a lot that first year. So and it's the system that requires that they meet the MQs with a master's degree. So I think within 3 to 5 years and have like some kind of academic plan. But trying to enroll in a master's program and learn how to teach full-time in a program and work-life balance was one of the reasons that they have decided that this was not for them at this time. And technically, we've lost several for work-life balance issues, but all other than that one was a minimum of master's prepared. So I don't know what other recruitment strategies we can employ at this time. The biggest challenges we're having now, I say, people have tried. We have more local applicants applying now, which is great, that have master's and doctorate degrees. But a lot of times what are stopping potential candidates is salary. Generally, master's degree holders on Kauai are nurse practitioners that work at Hawaii Pacific Health or other organizations, and they're bringing in 140, 150,000. And for us, that no matter how much we can get, it's hard to give anybody even close to that. So one candidate, really, she's a lecturer and she's, thought about it and applied and went all the way to get that negotiation stage. And she basically said, I can't, Tommy, that's more than 50% of my salary at this time. And when you're factoring the cost of living on Kauai, housing, and a lot of these nurse practitioners in the family might be the breadwinners of their family. So that's not an easy decision to make, even though she was really excited to switch to the academia side because she's been a lecturer and she did some clinicals with us at Kapiolani. So she was ready to make the move, but she just said she couldn't make the numbers work. So we're fighting against so many different fronts at the moment.
Thank you, Tammy. Denise, I have you next.
Hi, I'm Denise Cohen. I'm the president of Hawaii ANA. Hi, Tammy. I'm
Hi,
also
Tammy.
retired faculty from Maui. I feel guilty even saying that I'm retired. My question was, how many qualified applicants are you guys turning around every year? I know with Maui, before I retired, we had 100 qualified applicants and it could only accept, I think, right when I was retiring, it was about 30, some cases 20. Same issue, faculty retention, faculty recruitment.
Yeah, so it's interesting. There's been some changes in prereqs structuring, I think, within the last 3 years, where one of the prereqs is a co-req with our pathophysiology class, which we have done as a prereq before they're getting into the program here for retention of our students wise. So generally, the anatomy and physiology, there's a part 1 and part 2. Prior to this 3 years, they were offered fall and spring. But our vice chancellor, and again, we have recruitment issues across the campus, not just in nursing, and workload, they decided to do ANP1 in the fall and ANP2 in the spring, and ANP2 and patho are co-req together. So because of that, we didn't have two sections of pathophysiology, which is like the last gateway one before they can apply. So that actually brought down our numbers of qualified applicants every year, only because a lot of them couldn't get, we had one section of pathophysiology instead of two. But I will tell you, because I usually teach pathophysiology, that we maxed out that face-to-face course at 32 students. That's the highest number of seats in any face-to-face class on Kauai Community College. So just think, if 32 started, and if 32 are qualified, and I only offer 16 seats, I'm losing 50% of my qualified applicants. Now we have a new anatomy and physiology instructor, and they have decided to go back to offering anatomy 1 and 2 fall and spring. So because of that, we're now also able to do a co-req, so a pathophysiology in both fall and spring. 32 was kind of a lot, so we decided to decrease it to what's more average face-to-face classes on Kauai Community College of 24 in each section instead of 2. But that is still, now we're increasing to more than 48 qualified applicants. And if I still can only offer 16 seats, that's more now than 50% of qualified applicants that we are turning away.
Right.
So
Thank you.
lots of catch-22s.
Yeah.
Okay, are there any other clarifying questions anyone would like to ask? Okay, thank you, Tammy, for sharing those vital updates. And now it looks like we will be moving on to our strategic priority updates. Is there any public testimony on item number 4, the strategic priorities update? Okay, I don't see any, or hearing none. We'll move forward now. And I will hand this section to the HSCN staff for the supply survey, followed by a high-level update on center activities and our board discussion.
And that will be, oh, Carrie, you are, if you're talking, I see your mouth moving, but your mute line is lined. Carrie will be
here we
giving
go.
first presentation. There we go.
I am on one screen. I don't know what I'm doing in my life. Hi, everybody. I'm Carrie Oliveira. I'm the Associate Director of the Center for Nursing and the Workforce Researcher. There we go. And I also, hold on, I got to start my timer. I'm going to start my timer so I'm not a jerk. I'm also the workforce researcher. So basically all of the supply data that we collect and the education capacity data that we collect at the Center for Nursing and Report is me. So I'm delighted to give this little presentation about our nursing workforce supply survey. I like giving this presentation to new advisory board members so that you know what kind of data we have, so you can chat with me about how we do it better. So I have a couple of objectives today. One, just kind of give you a rundown of the supply survey, talk about the reports that we've put out from our 2025 survey to date. I also want to briefly, high speed, address of the current state of the workforce for LPNs, RNs, and APRNs, and specifically NPs, and then talk about some upcoming releases from our supply survey from 2025. So the survey, in case you are not familiar, and I really hope that if you're a nurse, you are familiar, because you have an opportunity to do this survey every 2 years when you renew your license at the Board of Nursing. So we conduct it in conjunction with the Board of Nursing with the tremendous support of PVL, and they make our survey link available in the license renewal for the online license renewal portal. So every odd number year, you'll log in, you do your license renewal, and then there's an invitation to the center to do the Center for Nursing survey. That's me, that's what this is. So we really appreciate all nurses doing it. It is voluntary. We appreciate PVL's language doesn't encourage that it is voluntary. So we do end up with a bunch of nurses just doing it for fun, which I really appreciate. The purpose of the survey is to really kind of get an overview of the characteristics of the nurses who work in the state of Hawaii. Because when we put those variables together, we can tell stories about the state of the workforce, how we're doing, where they're working, their educational background, et cetera. So we ask a bunch of questions. We ask demographics, educational background, employment characteristics, practice characteristics. We have questions related to retention, burnout, licensure, and other jurisdictions. There's a lot of information on this survey. If you do take it, thank you for spending the approximately 12 minutes that it takes to complete the survey. I appreciate you. This is a really successful data collection adventure for the Center for Nursing. It is our longest running data collection effort at the Center for Nursing. It's been going on continuously every odd numbered year since 2007. In 2025, we had the largest sample of valid records that we've ever had in the history of the survey. So the file came back to me with like 16,000 records in it. Once you scrub out the invalid records, it's 15,532 records. Of those, 8,100 reflect nurses who work in the state of Hawaii in a nursing role. So when we look at that, it's of the people who renewed a license, it's 43% of those, but in-state nurses are overrepresented among survey completers. If you've taken a look at our licensing data lately, you'll see that there's a weirdly big trend of out-of-state nurses holding Hawaii licenses. And so as that, right now, the majority, a larger proportion of non-residents hold a Hawaii license than residents. And because they are less inclined to do the survey of the valid responses, we're getting a disproportionately large number of nurses who work in the state of Hawaii. So we're about 50%-ish of the nurses in the state. So we consider that an extraordinarily robust sample. We feel very confident about the conclusions we draw about the workforce on the basis of these data. So we like to push these data out as quickly and in as varied and varied a method as possible. I cannot stand the idea of collecting data for it to just sit on a shelf and do nothing. So I make sure we don't do that. Almost always the first thing that we release is our statewide data tables by license. This one comes out, I don't know, within a couple of months, actually, the completion of our survey fielding period. This one, if you've never looked at this, it's an Excel file. I used to put it in a PDF and I just cannot anymore because the tables are too big. So you get the Excel file. Boss prefers it that way anyway, so everybody wins. But basically, it's a giant set of tables of frequency distributions for as many variables as it makes sense for me to run about the nurses who work in the state of Hawaii. And so like their demographic characteristics, their age, where they went to school, et cetera, all of that. And so it's tabulated by LPN, RN, and APRN. And we also have estimated counts of the nurses that those frequencies represent. In conjunction with that, because I think it's irresponsible to push out data without also providing technical documentation for those data, we do put out the tech document, which is basically the method for the survey. So if you have questions about how we conduct the survey, I would encourage you to read the tech document. Our most recent release and our kind of biggest production from the data is consistently our nursing workforce statewide report. That's the one with the beautiful orange cover. Our graphic designer, Drew Santiago, makes these like beautiful, juicy, puffy flowers I really enjoy, and it brings joy to my heart. This report, aside from being delicious to look at, serves two really crucial functions. One is it provides tabulations of the data in the supply survey by county. So to the point we were just discussing, if we only look at this statewide picture, because 75% of nurses reside on the island of Oahu, you only get Oahu, basically, if we only look at the state. And that is a wildly different picture than when you go to the neighbor islands. And so in order to disambiguate what is actually happening in the neighbor island counties, we pull Oahu out and we run that by county. The other thing that this report serves to do is provide a state of the workforce. And I'll be honest, I used to be really timid about saying, this is the state of the workforce, until I got annoyed at people just saying stuff about the state of the workforce that isn't substantiated by any data. So I decided I'm going to say it so that it's citable. And so that's what that report has evolved to function to do. So speaking of the state of the workforce, I do want to give you kind of a very big overview of what our conclusions are, and that these are reflected in the supply report if you haven't had a chance to read it yet, about the state of the LPN, RN, and NP workforces. If you were on my webinar last week, this is a little bit redundant, but much, much faster. About the LPN workforce, we have a shortage. We've had a shortage. We're going to continue to have a shortage. This is a function of consistent demand and shrinking education capacity. So if you take a look at the Healthcare Association of Hawaii's Health Workforce Initiative report, they report faculty or LPN vacancy rates 23% in 2024, 23%. That's almost a quarter of all LPN positions vacant in the entire state. Then that's after a shrinking of the number of LPN positions. So we just, even as LPN positions go away and they get converted to RN positions because you can't find LPNs, we still have a larger proportion of them that are open. So what is optimistic, and this number at the top, 2,800 LPNs, is sort of like the theoretical number we would need if we hired LPNs in the state of Hawaii in a pattern that is consistent with LPN hiring in the rest of the country, which we cannot do because we don't have the workforce. But if we could and did hire at that same sort of rate, we would have like 2,800 LPNs in the state. We have like 1,200. So that's a bananas comparison. We're never going to get to 2,800. I don't think there's a reason necessarily for us to do that. But I think it presents a stark contrast between if we were staffing LPNs like the rest of the country was, that's how many we would have. Optimistically, though, we're seeing an increase in capacity. This is, Tammy alluded to it, but the CNA LPN Bridge program at UH Maui College, underpinning that is the enormous support from the employers. The employers said, we need LPNs. So they provided financial support to make the tuition, to pay for faculty. They also give scheduling accommodations to their students so they can go to class, and they make clinical placements available within their organizations for their students. And that instrumental support really is crucial to expanding education capacity. So we'd like to see that model be replicated elsewhere. So as I point out, this is now, we're seeing Oahu being like, this model works. It can do, we can do. So Modeling something that works, I think, is really important. But again, underpinning that employer-school collaboration, and it helps to really right-size the workforce. We cannot have schools expected to expand capacity forever without there being a tether to the workforce. So that employer-school collaboration is really important to right-sizing our expansion in education capacity. And when you give the employers a stake in that, it works out a lot better. And to Tammy's point earlier, one of the things that's a challenge of having a LPN stop out from an RN, what you're doing is you're recruiting students who want to be RNs. So they will, the moment that they're financially or otherwise able to. But when you recruit students who really want to be LPNs, moving from CNA to LPN, for example, that's actually a career bump for them. And that's a motivation for them to stay in the role. And I think that's a great way to create sustainability in a short workforce. So that's what's up with LPNs. I love LPNs. They are near and dear to my heart. I'd like to see that get fixed. It's never going to, but I like the optimism. With respect to the registered nursing workforce, if I see one more news article that says we have a nursing workforce shortage in the state of Hawaii, I will pull out all my hair and eat it. We don't have a nursing workforce shortage in the state of Hawaii for registered nurses. What we have is an adequate supply until you parse that out and start looking at the counties. What we definitely have is we actually have a 103% of the registered nurses that we need in the state, which is not considered an oversupply. It's enough so that we have people can choose to do what they want to. But when you strip that away to the counties, I'm going to get to that here in a second, the story is very different. When we look at our vacancy rate for registered nurses, we have a 10% vacancy rate. That's down from 14% 2 years prior. When I expect HAH's new report to come out end of this year, maybe sometime in the middle of next, maybe, I'm expecting that vacancy rate to drop to something like 7 to 8%. We're hearing from our employers that they're staffing well, they're recruiting new grads. Everything is stable in terms of the broad big picture in the state. Our education capacity, by the way, is also adequate to meet hiring demand in registered nurses. We don't have a good reason to expand education capacity at this time. Dang it, I'm out of time. We don't have a need to expand education capacity at this time, but we have to preserve it. We cannot lose any of our capacity, particularly on the neighbor islands. Oh, hey, look, Kauai in particular is an issue. And exactly what Tammy just described, this is the phenomenon we're trying to protect against. As she pointed out, pay disparities and cost of living are an issue. UHERO actually wrote a report that specifically identifies this very unique problem on Kauai, where Kauai's wages are comparatively depressed and their cost of living is considerably higher. And that is a problematic issue for recruitment. I think somebody chatted me. Carrie, feel free to use an extra few times. Thanks, I appreciate that. I'm gonna. And then the other thing we need to do locally in order to support retention of the nurses who are already in the workforce is to create sustainable support for specialty training. So it doesn't help if a new grad comes out of school, they get a job, and then they're like, oh, I want to be an ICU nurse. And then they don't have any way to get trained to be an ICU nurse. And so we have to provide that training locally. The Center for Nursing has supported the expansion of specialty programs, but that was grant funded, and grant money goes away, as we know. So really trying to find a way to provide sustainable funding for specialty development is really important recruitment activity we need to be doing. The NP workforce, APRNs, I know, are more than NPs, but the other ones are really complicated to talk about, and NPs are 87% of the APRN workforce anyway. Our conclusion about the state of the NP workforce is that they're underutilized. And the big picture on that is we have a bunch of primary care certified nurse practitioners in the state who are not providing primary care. And we don't know why. We don't ask questions on our big survey about why that is the case. And so I think that warrants additional investigation to figure that out. We have 22% of our nurses are NPs working in other settings. And that's other includes not long-term care, not ambulatory care, and not hospital. They're working, I don't know where. I'd have to go dig in the data. I do actually have the data. But that to me is a weirdly high proportion of nurses who are not working in where you would expect to find a nurse practitioner working. So there's something interesting happening there. We also see a really low level of self-employment among NPs, particularly on Oahu. They're more likely to be self-employed on the neighbor islands than on Oahu because of hospital employment, I think higher degrees of hospital employment. So a couple of things where we have opportunities to really prioritize NP workforce development for the future. We know this, there's actually a joint state agency task force that is dealing with the examination of the inhospitable business environment that we've created in the state of Hawaii, which I have been screaming about for years upon years upon years. It's not just me, I'm not crazy, but if it's infeasible to have a business in the state, you're not gonna have a private practice. What? Weird. So let's make it possible for a nurse practitioner to open a business where, I don't know, in Ka'u or North Hawaii Island, where we actually need primary care providers, and make it financially viable for them to do so. So we need payment reform, repayment reform, and business and tax regulation reform. But we also need better data. I think we need more qualitative data, which wounds me as a scientist to say I don't like qualitative data. But in this case, we need it because we need to understand how NPs are making the decisions that they're making about the career choices that they're making. So that's kind of the upshot of the state of the workforce in our big orange report. The last thing I want to say is that more reports are coming. Like I said, I don't want to hold on to this data. So we have infographics that we're going to work on. Leanne Hussey and I work on those together. She's the design element of it. We also have a well-being report that we like to do on a semi-annual or biannual basis. We talk about new grads and then a faculty profile. Those are the ones that I have planned, but if there's something else you want to see, I would be delighted to be responsive to that request. So that's all I got. Questions, comments? Go team. Okay, I'm done. Thanks, boss.
You're very welcome. And you know what? If we go by the clock, you're actually 4 minutes shy.
Yay!
All right, my updates are going to be on the strategic plan. Last year, we went through a really big initiative doing statewide focus groups, and through those statewide focus groups, we and an appreciative inquiry approach. We consolidated that information. We learned our strengths. We learned our opportunities. We learned. We created aspirations. Those aspirations became, and we can go to the next slide. Those aspirations became our strategic priorities. So we have leadership development, nursing professional development, and enhanced nursing education. And then we are developing strategies to achieve these aspirations. So we have measures to make sure that we're on track and to goal, which if we go to the next slide, we can see what these measures are. So again, we have our aspirations, which turned into our strategies. We have measures and we have goals for progress over time. Much of our baseline data was based off either the 2023 or the 2025 workforce supply report, or we had program metrics that we used in some cases. So we just want to note that some of this data, and you can see that we have TBD, some of this data, and this was pulled from our report, the pretty glossy one, we have since updated because we have that 2025 workforce report that established our baseline. So if we go to our next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about the activities we have done to date related to the strategies. So for enhanced nursing education, we have 3 strategies. The first was to organize and host a symposium to exchange best practices and award excellence in nursing education. We just so happened to have developed the Hawaii Nursing Scientific Symposium, which this is an initiative that helps nurses in academia, but also in clinical practice, highlight their research, their evidence-based practice initiatives, and their quality improvement initiatives. They're able to disseminate this with their peers. It was a really exciting and wonderful event that we had in February. So we are going to continue that. There's the second part of that is in 2024, we had what did we call it? The Hawaii Nurse Residency Program or Hawaii Transition to Practice Program Conference. And so knowing that we have multiple conferences are huge initiatives to pull off. We thought, well, let's look at this HNSS. Let's consider, let's look at who our participants were, our audiences. Is it feasible to have this track just for the nursing education component? So that's a work effort that we are looking at for our future conferences. So building on these strong initiatives, really working on fostering Pilina within our nursing community. So not just having strong organizational culture, but cross-organizational culture through these shared initiatives and activities that nurses are doing in their professional scope. And the second is to promote legislation related to incentives for nursing faculty. We heard from Tammy, salary is really difficult for nurse faculty in particular. We ended up not pursuing this for 2 reasons. One is when we did our strategic initiative planning, we had a request to kind of pause on this and not have it as our first strategy. But secondly, there's some events that happened in the past year. So one is we do have a statewide initiative that the governor passed several years ago. And at this point, I think there's been $60 million funded in this initiative, and it's called the HELP program, the Hawaii education loan, healthcare education loan repayment in payment. That program is run by the JAPSOM AHEC Area Health Education Center. They have distributed a large amount of student loan repayment. You do have to have 30% of your patient care supporting public insured people. So that's TRICARE as well as Medicare, Medicare, Medicaid, so MedQuest or Medicare. But that is an initiative, and we do see a lot of faculty that continue to have those clinical roles, or we have nurses who now that they're completed with their student loans, they might be able to afford a salary that doesn't have to accommodate their student loan costs as well. The second thing is that the Rural Health Transformation Program's Home Run Initiative, which is one of 5 of their initiatives, does have a significant scholarship component to it. The federal government is still releasing rules and regulations in terms of grant administration. So there's no formal launch to these yet. It's kind of still in the planning phase, but there is a scholarship, a nursing scholarship. So for those nurses who are seeking to advance their education so that they can engage in activities, professional engagement, like being nurse faculty, there may be these opportunities in state to support their professional goals. And so we will be collaborating with AHEC, that AHEC happens to be running both of these. So the Hawaii Pacific Basin, AHEC, as the lead agency on this, is seeking partnerships. We work very closely with them. So we will be working to get this information out to nurses across the state. It is a rural health initiative, so I've been kind of joking, it's all of the state, and for Oahu, it's like not the ice cream cone, but just the ice cream is how my mind works. But it's basically, you go like Kapolei, Mililani, Kailua, make that the ice cream, anything above that or to the west of that qualifies, anything below all the way down to Sandy's Beach is disqualified. So imagine your ice cream cone of Oahu, you're welcome for that visual. And that's for all of the rural health initiatives. And then the last is we're working to design, develop, and implement faculty professional development for schools of nursing. We do have funding for this. And although we've had funding, we hadn't solidified a strategy that we felt really gelled. So we have continued to fulfill the legislature's request to supporting clinical instructors, but we really needed a better strategy, and that's why it ended up here. It hasn't gone into program phase. So we've continued to work with our deans and directors of schools of nursing and their program directors and the feedback from the past recipients of this professional development to determine what is needed. Right now, we have a suite of resources that we are providing. We have Nurse Tim, which we actually have a license that is for every single school of nursing in the state, and that's full-time faculty, part-time faculty, and graduate students, and their deans or directors can administer that so they can really facilitate and use that within their programs. Then we have simulation training, we have kind of clinical 101 training, and we have some other curriculum that we're looking at. And what we're doing is going out to the schools and saying, here's a suite, or tell us if there's an other, and tell us what is needed. And so what are your clinical faculty, particularly your newer clinical faculty, this is who it's geared for. What are they asking for? And let's make sure that we are delivering that based off of their professional needs. And that's really, as Tammy said, that first year is so hard. If you're coming from bedside, this is a completely different specialty. And so we're really trying to equip these nurses to be successful in that first year so they don't feel like they're in the lurch. And we recognize that on demand is just as important as cohorted education so that these folks can have the resources they need exactly when they need it, like either anticipatory or on demand. Next slide. For professional development, we have many strategies. This is our busiest or most robust area. The first is that we are working to facilitate sharing of resources across organizations to increase the number of transition to practice support in non-acute settings. We are focusing on non-acute because we have good representation in our acute facilities, and those are our nurse residency programs. We've also been able to develop the specialty training that Carrie mentioned, not at the pace, but we're working on bringing more funds for specialty transition to practice. So not as a pace that we saw with the grant funding, but it has been sustained without grant funding. And we're working to make that robust again. But these successes that organizations have, we want to help others learn and gain their own success by learning from others. And so we have national resources and local resources that we're putting together. So we have consolidated the resources, and we're right now working on that partner identification, and we're going to vet the resources, make sure it's what they want, how they want it before we make that final. The second is conducting a needs assessment. So Carrie in her Bambucha survey that you just heard had a question on what are your unmet educational needs, and so that is a resource now that we have and we can look to and learn from. So we have this bank of large amount of responses, and that helps us hear the voice of nurses even when we don't have that one-to-one contact. At least we have had that survey that lets them communicate to us, and we can respond to them over time. So now we are developing those offerings in response to this feedback. We also ask that question on every continuing professional development activity that we host. And so we also look to that and say, okay, well, what can we pull and how can we develop this? If we can't do it ourselves, oftentimes we will find another organization and say, hey, we know that you have this content knowledge. We can validate this and we can help you justify putting on that training yourself. The third is improving our marketing and communication. We know that we have, with our strategies, they have a high impact, but maybe low recognition. That's something that we've known for a long time. It is one of our challenges. When you do state strategy, you may not have face recognition with every nurse that you've supported along the way. Last year, we had over 3,000 nurses, nursing clinical placement support. Last year, we had about 1,300 nurses in our between our Hawaii Transition to Practice program. I think it was about 1,300. So, but we know that maybe all of those nurses may not know that the Center for Nursing has supported them in their career. So we have we've identified that we need some support with communications. We have the budget for it, and so now we just need to post for that role and that support. And then last, we did seek, there was this large rural health transformation program. We did seek partnership in that program to expand our rural health residencies. We're looking at this not just as supporting the new grad, but we know that when a new grad comes in, the whole unit needs to be supported. So we have included support for clinical nurse educators, unit professional development, as well as the resident alone. So like the whole, like raise all boats situation. So there is funding. We actually did get it into in the grant, and so we were able to support. It's $400,000 a year for 5 years, so long as all of the components of the grant, which is a very large initiative, are all successful. So we're very excited about that. And again, that's all of the neighbor islands plus the ice cream of Oahu. We're gonna trademark that. No, just and then finally, the last slide is leadership development. This one looks small, but it's packed full. So we have aimed to develop a suite of leadership professional development offerings. I mentioned the Rural Health Transformation Grant. Leadership training can be included in that, because when you're new to that specialty, that is a specialty, is management. But also developing content or bringing in content as well. So evidence-based practice for nurse leaders, leadership workshop for aspiring nurses, and interpersonal skills for nurses, which happens to be Carrie's pre-Center for Nursing specialty. So we got a winner there. So we are going to plan and implement those. We were really working on those other elements I spoke about in nursing professional development and nursing education in this year one. So we hadn't launched anything on this, but we had planned to start doing that in the second year. So those are the big initiatives that we have achieved or made progress on in this first year of our strategic plans. I want to say that in this time that we have left on this section, we have about 15 minutes. And so, we have the strategies, we have these activities, but we really want to hear from the board in your advisory capacity, what your feedback is, any guidance that you would like to provide, any insight, any course correction or direction. So I please want to welcome the communication and the conversation.
Thank you, Laura and Carrie. Rose, you have a question for them?
Yes. I was I was kind of missing like the retention area because that's such a big thing that I see that the Hawaii Center for Nursing is to focus on. And then I noticed that you said you're not going to focus on the acute care facilities, but from my experiences of watching and seeing what's happening in acute care is going away from education. The person-to-person education is so important, and I think some areas would probably benefit, especially as we're getting a lot of younger recruits and less experience, that we need to make sure that we have that might help with retainment, because the frustration for the bedside nurses that I hear is preceptors. They don't want to precept anymore. There's no desire to do preceptors, and I see a lot of activities here for preceptors, but from what I've seen in the hospital, people are shying away from it because there's such a huge responsibility and a lot more responsibility for the preceptor, especially with the high stress workload that they have. I mean, I don't see that reflected here, and I think that's really big, unless it's in the data. So maybe something to footnote to look at.
Yeah. So and thank you for that feedback. So these are our strategic priorities for our strategic plan. It does not represent any of our programs that are pre-existing. So all of our program work that is full and robust wasn't presented in our strategic plans. They're kind of at different levels organizationally. I will know, and you can look at our annual report, that our existing programs really do focus on that retention piece, and they also do focus on acute care. So we've kind of overemphasized acute care. Acute care happens to be our easier community partners to collaborate with in clinical practice. And so when I mentioned the focus of our strategic priorities is not acute care, it's because we have 14 hospitals, acute care hospitals, that have robust recruitment and retention partnerships in collaboration with the Center for Nursing. And to that point, and for a long time, we focused on the new grad, and I hear you, and we also have recognized that we need to continue to look at retention strategies for the workforce beyond the entry to practice. But for entry to practice, we are able to celebrate a 97% retention rate for our new grads who go through our nurse residency programs across the state, across the nation. Their retention is 71%. So we're doing far better there. We also, and preceptor, we have seen as the data is pretty wild. I believe that on the nursing workforce supply survey, 47% of nurses that they were engaging in a preceptor activity, but we've also seen in our clinical placement, program, Hawaii Clinical Placement Collaborative, that it's more challenging to get preceptors, particularly for students. And we recognize that, just as you said, that this is, it's kind of a litmus test or an indicator of burnout and fatigue. And so we are watching this as we are focusing on the preceptor piece. And if you see that, it's in our measures, because this is a really important component of giving back to your profession. But if you don't feel like you have the capacity, that's something that we need to pay attention to, because that's an indication that there are other factors that are needed to relieve the workload. So, I just want to mention that we don't have the program reports here. That wasn't the focus of this presentation, but it's absolutely there. And I agree that acute care still is a priority overall for our state.
Great, thank you, Laura. Hi, Terry. I see your hands up. Do you have a question?
Well, I just
Chair,
kind of,
sorry, Chair, can I would recommend that you take the question that was posed to the board was discussion. Public members are providing testimony at this time, so I would suggest that you emphasize the conversation and communication from the board before the public testimony.
I can wait.
Okay, yes, thank you, Carrie. So are there any, does the board have any clarifying questions?
I see Linda's hand up.
Oh, hi, Linda.
Thank you. I do, and thank you to Carrie and to Laura for those reports, because it just highlights how much wonderful work we've been doing over the last few years. And I've been on this board for several years, and I feel like I'm congratulating myself too. Yes, we've done excellent work. And I'm also having a look back at our strategic plan document that we that we developed for 2025 through 2029. And in the section about our opportunities, it was one, to improve workforce conditions to enhance retention. And I would really encourage us to address it says staffing shortages being the first thing, but we've already established that we have the number of nurses that we need in the state to provide care that's being offered at this time. But the other part of that opportunity was to address workload demands and job satisfaction to create a more sustainable nursing workforce. And I would really encourage us to work with that opportunity too at this time. I think it's timely. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Linda. Are there any other questions from any of the board members? Any other board members? Okay. Terry, did you want to go ahead with your question now?
Yeah, not so much a question, but I guess I just wanted to, provide, I guess, testimony. Sorry, it's so official, and I'm just used to not being so official. But kind of to the point of, I heard Carrie ask, about the nurse practitioners and kind of where have they gone. And I just, from what I see, in our place, I mean, there are more people getting advanced degrees. We have great benefits and educational trust that they access. I do work at Kaiser, and so it is something that many people take advantage of. And just in sharing, part of it is that they want to get away from the bedside because of the working conditions and how hard it is. And so once they get that master's degree, they don't necessarily go for an NP, but they do go for some sort of advanced practice, and they're out there doing, Botox injections, the GLP-1s. They are out there working with a physician, and they're writing orders, and they're doing all of that. So that is a big part of where I see quite a few people who go in and just leave the bedside. They're looking for easier work that might pay them a little bit more. And it is discouraging because I think on a monthly basis, I am trying to discourage people from leaving the bedside because they're far too young. They're in their, mid 50s to late 50s and probably have another 10 years to give to our profession. And, as your studies have shown, the burnout is real. And I do think even though the numbers are showing we have more than enough RNs, at this point, maybe not in the places that we want them to be, there are opportunities for us to engage them more to stay and use the experience that they have, because they do not want to be preceptors at this point. They find because their workload is not lessened, as they're taking care of more acutely ill patients, that it is more challenging. And so to give the time and effort that they need to get someone well, they do not, unfortunately, even though they may want to, give the benefit to the newer nurses that are at the bedside. And thus some of them the newer nurses end up not having that same sort of attachment to someone that they can rely on. So I just kind of wanted to share some of that. And, not that there's always easy answers, but it's something that I think if there's a way to focus on some of these things, it might just encourage, you know, some of the things that we want to have in our community. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Terry, for sharing that testimony. Is there anyone else who would like to provide anything or testify? Okay, if there's no, oh, yes, Carrie.
Carrie's hand.
Hi, Carrie.
I actually, Terry, to your comment about where not just NPs but RNs as well, moving to kind of what we would consider maybe not traditional settings. I think one of the revisions I'm gonna make for the 2027 nursing workforce supply survey is to add med spa or other types of settings to our survey to actually quantify the extent to which folks are moving into those settings. So I think that that's definitely something that our data can address. So thank you for raising that.
Yeah, if I can add, with the LPN workforce, we have spoken extensively with employers to say don't plan on a long-term workforce. And so part of workforce strategy is that we have to think about the lifespan of a nurse in a role. So, and let me start with a different example. One is nursing faculty. Usually, you usually enter a nursing instructor or nursing faculty role in your 40s, and then you have about a 20-year career. Whereas if you're a bedside nurse, you might start in your 20s and then retire in your 60s. That's a 40-year career. And so the on-ramp and off-ramp are much different. When we're looking at an LPN workforce, we used to have LPNs who would be LPNs for 15 or 20 years. And now we're looking at LPNs who are LPNs for 20 or 30 years. And so when we talk to our education providers and we talk to our employers, the people who are hiring nurses, we also have these conversations about your workforce strategies need to also include the practical lifespan of a nurse, which may be different over time. We may, when we had that, like, you know, during the mid-aughts, when there were just like we went through a woeful recession where a lot of men lost their good careers, women then, and we saw this in nursing, stayed in their careers and they stayed a lot longer, and we saw how that impacted nursing workforce overall. And so I just want to recognize that the retention, we also have to look at, you know, we want to retain nurses, but also if there is kind of a lifespan for retaining a nurse, like an LPN, if we're looking at 2 years, then we need to put that into our education plans and our work, like our retention strategies in the workplace, or our recruitment strategies in the workplace. So it should be informed by all of these different factors, not just one alone. And we try to have these conversations pretty often and pretty regularly, both to hear what the environment is and then see if we can extend it. But if we can't extend it, then how do we work with, for instance, our education providers to supplement the incoming workforce, which, you know, Terry, to your point, it is fatiguing to continually be onboarding and orienting somebody new. And so there is benefit for longer retention, absolutely. But a stabilizing mechanism is to increase more new grads and really facilitate that welcoming environment, and hopefully they'll stay longer. So it's like a lot of things all at once. So I just wanted to mention those as strategies that we look at for the state.
Hi, Haley. Would you like to ask questions or make a comment or?
Hi, everyone. This is Haley. I'm a registered nurse on Maui and also president-elect of Hawaiʻi ANA. But continuing this conversation, as a floor nurse at the hospital, I've had many colleagues who have gone on to get their NP degree because Kaiser's helps pay for it. And we have about 8 that I can count offhand that left the hospital to get outside jobs to work as an NP, and then have since returned to work as a floor nurse again due to a variety of reasons. One is the pay, because they were making significantly less than the hospital nurses. Like perhaps I think my medical group starts off at like $50 an hour. And then the training was a lot of the feedback that I heard is that, one nurse got hired at a doctor's oncology office and was just kind of thrown into the deep end. And being an acute care nurse in a hospital, she didn't have that intensive background knowledge on how to handle oncology patients. So she left shortly thereafter. And then another nurse did, I think it was like a primary care, like gynecology office. And then after a year and a half working there, she just recently left as well to come back to the hospital. So I think it's, physicians, when they specialize, they have full residency programs and they have a preceptor and they're completely trained. But with the nurse practitioners, we go through our schooling and they do their clinical hours. But then once they enter the workforce, at least from what I've heard from ancillary, my colleagues, is that they don't have that support and training. Or if they luck out, they find a physician to work under who is willing to train them into the specialty. So not just pay differentials that's causing these NPs to perhaps leave practice and become regular RNs again in acute care or clinic settings. Just something to consider as well.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Haley. It looks like we're just past our time, so we will move on to our legislative updates. This is item number 5. Is there any public testimony on this item, either in the room or online? Okay. I don't see any or hear any, so we will go ahead and move forward. Before we start item 5, the HSCN staff will give us a quick refresher on the ethics code requirements for this specific section, as it involves several external organizations.
Hey, can everyone hear me? Okay, well, we are transitioning into being very diligent with our ethics codes and our operations here with the advisory board. Thank you, Chair. For the record, I'll provide a detailed clarification regarding the state ethics code for HRS 84-14 as it relates to our legislative discussion today. Under Hawaii law, a conflict of interest is triggered when a board member's official action affects a business or a private undertaking with which they are affiliated. The Ethics Commission defines an official action to include not only a final vote, but also any participation in the board's deliberations, recommendations, or the use of discretionary authority. Specifically, if a member has already provided testimony for or against a legislative measure on behalf of an organization, that organization is considered to have a direct and specific interest in the outcome. In these instances, to ensure the board's positions remain legally defensible and independent, the member is required to disclose that interest and recuse themselves from all discussion on that measure. Because our legislative discussion involves specific bills that may directly impact various professional organizations or employers, we provide this reminder to protect the integrity of the center's records and the validity of the board's positions. This ensures our records are beyond reproach should they be reviewed by the State Ethics Commission. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Bree. Let me see here. Okay. Based on that, are there any disclosures or recusals for any of the items in this section on the agenda from any of our board members? Hi, Linda.
Thank you, Jeanette. I'm Linda Beach-Nor, and I'm a member of the advisory board. I have been a member for several years now, and I'm unsure how to go forward with this request. I only received this information at less than an hour before the meeting started, and this has never come up before in past discussions about legislative issues, because I am also the vice president of Hawaii American Nurses Association and have done testimony in past years and have done this year too. So I'm confused about this, and I certainly don't want to compromise the center's integrity in any way. And I would ask, as a member of the board, for resources to advise me regarding this issue before I would make any statement as to recusal.
Thank you. And if you don't mind, Chair. So as we have discussed at our last meeting, we have new sunshine rules and new ethics codes. We've been reviewing all of the documents. And so as we discussed in the last meeting, there is new information that we are trying to abide by, new to you, new to us. But making the point to withhold the laws and rules established for the boards and commissions is why we are engaging in this process today. We started out the conversation at our last meeting in January, and we continue to go through and make sure that we are meeting the requirements set forth by our state. Yeah, and Bree has more information if you'd like more.
For the board members, we did give you kind of a cheat sheet, references of things to remember when you're in board meetings, how to make motions, the like. There is the link there for the attorney of the day at the Ethics Board Commission. If you do have any specific question about whether or not you may have a personal conflict of interest, that is what they're there for. Please feel free to use that telephone number to call about those issues. I think it's important to note, and while I won't get into the eccentricities of what is and isn't a conflict of interest, because I am not the attorney of the day, I can say, generally speaking, if there is something up that is going to affect all healthcare or all nurses equally, and it doesn't provide a material benefit, then it's not something in which anyone has to recuse themselves just because they work in healthcare. It's not intended to look for something that is very broad. So it only is in reference to very specific instances where there is considered a material benefit, a benefit of interest. So just because you work at an institution and your employer might benefit because they pass a bill, that does not mean that that is a specific interest. That's just kind of general for healthcare. So it's fake. It's complicated. That's why they pay the attorneys of the day to make sure that they're there to answer all of those questions.
Yeah, and there is recognition that the majority of this board are nurses for the Center for Nursing, and it is germane. So trying to seek that information and that distinction that Bree made, if it is material benefit to you in an organization, not kind of generally applicable to nursing at large. So yeah, and just to clarify, Linda, this is that continuation from those materials and resources we provided in earlier this year.
Thank you. I really appreciate the resources, and I'll follow up on that.
Yeah, and thank you, Bree, for preparing everything. It's quite extensive, as we've noted many times in this meeting today. The time, the rigor, if this is your first meeting, you'll note that we're adding a lot more information about call for testimony, and that protocol. All of this protocol is new, so we're all learning together.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Linda, for sharing that disclosure.
Well, I will get started with the presentation then.
Yeah, thank you.
So we have there's 4 major initiatives that we were tracking. The first is the HRS barrier. review bill. This was an initiative of the Hawaiʻi State Center for Nursing going back to 2022, where we worked with an interprofessional team to look at all of the state laws outside of scope of practice, to see where there are limitations in state law for healthcare workers to do their work. And this impacts nursing quite extensively. The bills happened to have died this session. They were working on the Senate bill, didn't get its second hearing. We didn't have any testimony in opposition, and we did have a couple more follow-up and feedback points that we were working on and we will continue to work on, and we'll take it forward next session. The second initiative is the preceptor tax credit bill. HB 1591 is a working vehicle right now. It had its hearing this morning. It is moving forward. The proposal is to expand the preceptor tax credit program to include social workers, registered dietitians, and PAs, as well as expand to residencies beyond medical residencies alone. Giovanna, to your point earlier, or just a moment ago about the need to support nurse practitioners in their transition to practice, this would potentially facilitate that. So this does benefit the preceptor. We've talked a bit about, quite a bit about preceptors today. It is at the APRN, physician, pharmacist, and if added, PA, social work and registered dietitian, and you can mix and match. And so it is not nurse to nurse or physician to physician, but it does support interprofessional education. The Center for Nursing happens to also administer this program. The third initiative, kind of overall, is related to nurse staffing and well-being. To Linda, your point about the strategic in the opportunities in our strategic plan. The first suite of bills, HB 2285 and SB 3104, relates to the Nurse License Compact. It is dead this session. I will note that it was discussed at the Board of Nursing. The Nurse License Compact overall was discussed at the Board of Nursing. Was that last week? Last week. The Board of Nursing last week, was that Thursday?
We had a Board of Nursing meeting last week. We didn't discuss the compact, did we?
Yeah, in your notes from the
from the mid-year meeting.
conference.
Yes.
Yeah, the
there was
mid-year
that
meeting. So
discussion.
there was a brief discussion about the Nurse License Compact as it relates to the Rural Health Transformation Program. And whether or not our state has committed to this as a contingent factor to receive more funds in the future, we don't know. So there's a lot of maybe unconfirmed language floating around the community about whether or not the Nurse License Compact will become a large and serious initiative in the future. So I just want to note that there will be fiscal impacts to the Center for Nursing if we engage in the Nurse License Compact. So I just want to note that fiscal impact as well. HB 1865, SB 2763, the Nurse Staffing Committees, is dead this session. It engaged it proposed 3 large initiatives, or 3 sections in this bill. The first was to institute nursing staffing committees that would be overseen by the Department of Labor or promulgated within the Department of Labor laws. The second is revise the advisory board composition, and the third is to change the mandates. That bill, that suite of bills did die this session. That last item that I mentioned, the changing the Center for Nursing mandates, the activity specifically was to develop a dashboard of safe staffing recommendations, specifically ratios. That has been converted into a resolution. HR 97, HCR 105 is the working vehicle. The other one is SR 112 and SCR 119. I think, I'm sorry, I didn't put that in the notes. The Center for Nursing has welcomed the opportunity to do this report. We did write testimony asking that it change from a dashboard and move to a list or a repository, because the majority of the nursing professional organizations that we have reviewed their content for is not ratios, it's primarily strategies, and so we don't want to exclude that information. We also noted that because the strategies, some organizations really prioritize those strategies. HSCN, I spoke to them personally, and they said, hey, you know, if you get the first 6 strategies done, you'll finish the 7th, which is you'll get the 7th strategy, which is the ratio, will happen automatically. So we felt that it was important to have those strategies included. So right now the report got passed out of Ways and Means today. The report currently does say ratios, so it is a repository of ratios. I think it would be, and we'll seek guidance of the advisory board as the report or the resolution does recommend. But it's likely that we will create a permitted interaction group because, as we just mentioned in the conversation a little bit earlier, conducting open meetings has become very technical, and we want to, and it is very difficult to engage in dialogue outside of these public meetings. And so it will be important to set up a specific PIG, stands for Permitted Interaction Group. I'm sorry for the acronym, it's not mine. We will likely set up a PIG in a future meeting so we can engage in those activities to support this activity should it get passed as a concurrent resolution. So it needs the Senate confirmations as well. And then we do have some other initiatives that we have provided testimony on related to safe work environments, particularly some bills that would decrease the prevalence of violence or the incidence of violence by some primary prevention. All of our testimony is, and we have provided supportive testimony for the HELP program in addition. So I just want to mention that all of our other testimony is on our website.
Thank you, Laura. I see that we are a little bit over our time here. At this time, is there any public testimony on item number 6? This is our future agenda items and planning. Okay, so moving to item 6, future agenda items to ensure we are staying aligned with our statutory mandates and strategic priorities. I'll hand this over to our director, Laura Reichart, to lead a brief discussion.
All right, thank you so much. Just wanted to, again, open the conversation, make sure that if there's any additional feedback related to our strategic plans, any of the workforce research, faculty development, wellness, et cetera, that we haven't engaged in dialogue today, that we just have a moment to address that and get that good advice from you all.
Okay. And moving on to item 7, is there any public testimony on our upcoming events? If none, I don't see any. I'll hand over these updates on the upcoming events back to Laura again.
All right, there is a national conference. I just want to let you guys know that Carrie is the conference co-chair and is also supporting a pre-conference activity. She's very engaged in the National Forum. We also generally support travel for 1 or 2 advisory board members to support your professional development and engagement as in nursing workforce strategy. And so if you are interested to come with us to Minnesota, I hear Minnesota is a fun place. If you want to come with us to Minnesota, if you can contact me or Bree, we can support that activities. We do have funding for 2 individuals. I will be on a panel related to nurse residency and transition practice programs. Bree, you're doing the pre-conference. Sorry, I'm looking at Carrie and I'm saying Bree. Carrie's doing a pre-conference activity. And then are you doing any other panels or presentations?
I'm on a panel on the benefit of creating a nationwide public use data set of nursing workforce supply data.
And this is, we often call this, somebody from Kansas once said that this is like the Nursing Workforce Center summer camp. If I can pitch this and sell this to anyone, but please do join us. So if you are available and you're interested in learning more and developing your capacity as a board member, we welcome you to come with us. And then the next, we have some learning series. We have our APRN learning series. So it's a series of 3 activities. Our next 2 topics will be AI and being a business owner. So two topics, or one topic that we've definitely talked about today. And then nursing policy learning series. One of our initiatives is to increase the capacity of nurses in policy and advocacy. And so we have been doing these annually for, I think this is our third year. Really trying to have a deeper conversation about nurse policy, not just like, hey, let's think of an idea and let's pitch it, but like understanding this long continuous process. So the next session will be in May, and I'm pretty sure it's what died and what passed is usually that topic that I do at the beginning of the year. And then August and October, we start thinking about like, how do we do implementation, and then how do we think about the future initiatives and needs. Right.
Hey, great. Okay, everyone, and members, we have reached the end of our agenda. Is there any further business to come before the board? None? Okay, hearing none. Seeing none, our meeting is adjourned at 6:35 p.m. Mahalo, everyone, and we'll see you again next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeanette.